There is a specific quality to the light in a hospital room at 3 in the morning. It is not dark and it is not bright. It is the light of somewhere that never fully sleeps, a dim, neutral glow from the panel above the bed, the sharper light that comes in under the door from the corridor, the blinking red of the monitoring equipment that measures your heart and your oxygen and the pressure of your blood and reports these numbers to a screen that someone will check when they check. I lay in that light for 12 days. 12 days following a surgery that my surgeon described beforehand as serious but manageable, and that became in the course of it something more serious than manageable. A complication. The word complication in a surgical context has a specific weight that is different from its weight in ordinary conversation. In ordinary conversation, a complication is an inconvenience. In a surgical context, a complication is the moment the room changes. I was 64 years old. I was strong. I had been strong my whole life. The kind of strong that comes from working hard and not indulging self-pity and moving forward through the things that require moving through. I had raised 2 children mostly on my own after my husband Thomas passed when they were young. I had worked for 30 years as a bookkeeper managing other people's numbers with a precision that satisfied something in me that needed order. I was strong. And for 12 days in a hospital room in September, I was also afraid. Not constantly, not at every hour. But in the long nights, in the 3 in the morning light, when the corridor was quiet and the monitor blinked red, and the surgery's complication was still being managed by medication, and the doctor's careful attention in those hours, I was afraid, in the way that people are afraid when they have been given briefly a view of the edge of their own life. My daughter Wren was there. Wren is 35. She drove 4 hours from where she lives the morning after I was admitted. She sat in the chair beside my bed for the first 4 days and slept in it for 2 of them. And when she finally went home, because she had her own life and her own responsibilities, she called me 3 times a day and arranged for my friend Dottie to come in the afternoons and coordinated with the nurses and made sure that someone who loved me knew what was happening at every moment. She was there. My son Elliot was not. Elliot is 38. He lives 40 minutes from the hospital. He called on the first day, a brief call, while I was still in recovery, where he said the right things in the specific tone of someone saying the right things rather than feeling them. He said he would come as soon as he could. He said things were complicated right now, but he was thinking about me. He said to let him know if there was anything I needed. He did not come. Not on day 2. Not on day 3. Not through the complication which Wren told him about on the phone and which prompted another call in which Elliot said the right things again in the same specific tone. 12 days. 40 minutes away. He did not come once. I told myself in the hospital that there were reasons. I did not know yet what they were, but I told myself they existed. Because the alternative that my son, who lived 40 minutes away, had simply chosen not to come, was a thought I was not ready to hold fully, while I was also holding the fear and the pain and the uncertainty of those 12 days. I held it after. After is what I want to tell you about. After I went home. Wren helped me settle. Dottie brought soup. My neighbour Frank shoveled the front walk because I couldn't yet and didn't mention it, just did it. And after, when I was home and recovering, and the immediate fear had receded enough that I could think clearly, I picked up my phone and looked at something I hadn't looked at in the hospital, because looking at it in the hospital would have used energy I didn't have. I looked at my daughter-in-law's Instagram. Casey Elliot's wife posts frequently. Photographs. Their life in the specific curated form of someone who has built a social media presence around the aesthetics of her own existence. I had followed her account because she is my son's wife, and because the photographs sometimes included my grandchildren. I scrolled back to the week I was in the hospital. What I found was 31 photographs. Beaches, cocktails, a resort pool, a sunset over water, restaurant meals, a parasailing photograph taken from the air, photographs of the children, my grandchildren, in the ocean building sandcastles eating ice cream. Captions, finally here. Island time. No plans, no schedule, just us. This is what living looks like. 31 photographs over 12 days. My son had not been able to come to the hospital. He had been in Florida. I put down my phone. I sat in the chair in my living room, the chair where I had sat to read for 30 years, where I had sat the morning Thomas died, where I had sat the night Wren called to tell me she'd gotten the job she'd been hoping for, where I had sat through all the things that required sitting with, and I sat with this. 12 days, 40 minutes, Florida, 31 photographs. No plans, no schedule, just us. I sat for a long time, and then I picked up the phone. Not to call Elliot, not yet. To call my attorney. My name is Dorothy. Everyone calls me Dot, except Wren, who has called me Mum with the specific warmth of a person for whom the word carries weight. I am 64 years old, 65 in December, a birthday I now have more investment in reaching than I did before September. I was born in a small city in upstate New York and have lived in it my entire life in 3 houses. The one I grew up in, the one Thomas and I bought when we married, and the one I bought after Thomas died, when the children were grown, and I needed something that was entirely mine. This last house is a small craftsman on a tree-lined street. It has a porch. I drink my morning coffee on it from April through October, and I intend to drink it there for many more years. Thomas died 17 years ago. He was 49, a heart attack sudden the morning of a Tuesday in March. The children were in their teens. Elliot was 21, and in college, Wren was 18 and about to start. I raised them, not from birth. Thomas had been there for most of that, but through the particular crucible of losing a parent young through the years where the absence of a father reshapes everything. I worked. I managed. I did not collapse because collapsing was not available to me in a house with 2 young people who needed me to remain upright. I am not describing this to seek credit for it. I am describing it because it is the context of the relationship I have with my children. A relationship forged in a difficult time in which I showed up in the ways that mattered, and in which I believed for 38 years that my son would do the same for me when the same was needed. I was wrong about that. Let me tell you more about Elliot, because he deserves to be understood rather than simply judged. Elliot is my firstborn. He was the child who was most like Thomas, the pragmatism, the dry humor, the way of thinking through problems rather than feeling through them. As a boy, he was never demonstratively affectionate, not cold, but contained the kind of child who shows love through actions rather than words, and who receives it the same way. He married Casey 8 years ago. Casey is 36. She is the kind of beautiful that photographs well. She is aware of this and has built a significant Instagram following around it. The life she and Elliot have built presented in the filtered, arranged aesthetic of someone who understands how images work. She is intelligent and organized, and has in the 8 years I have known her a quality that I have found difficult to name precisely. The closest I've come is Casey is the kind of person who is very good at being in the room when the room is good, and very good at not being in the room when the room is difficult. I do not say this with contempt. I understand it as a survival skill probably acquired early. Some people manage discomfort by leaving the situation. Casey is an expert at this. Elliot, who had his own version of this quality, the problem-solving over feeling through, had, in the 8 years of their marriage, gotten better at it, under her influence, not worse. Together they had built a life that was comfortable and attractive, and that I was to be honest at the edges of. Not excluded, not the way other stories I might tell you describe exclusion, but at the edges, invited to the events that made a good photograph, included in the gatherings that required grandmother's presence for the children's sake, present at the perimeter of a life that moved on its own logic and whose center I was not. I had accepted this, not happily, not always without grief, but I had accepted it as the natural drift that can happen between parents and adult children who build their own lives in their own directions. What I had not accepted, had not been willing to predict, was that the drift would reveal itself as something more fundamental in a hospital room in September. And then it did. Let me tell you about the surgery first, and then I'll tell you about the photographs, and then I'll tell you about the letter. And then I'll tell you about the will. The surgery had been planned for 6 weeks. A hip replacement, the right hip, which had been deteriorating for 3 years, and which had reached the point where the pain was affecting my sleep and my mobility and my ability to do the things that constitute my daily life. My orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Vanek, was direct and reassuring in equal measure. This was a common procedure thousands performed every day. Recovery was real but manageable. The outcomes were excellent. "You're healthy," he said. "64 is young for this. You'll do well." I told both children in August when the date was confirmed, September 14th. Ren said, "I'm coming. What time should I be there?" Elliot said, "That's a big deal, Mum. We'll be thinking of you." I noted the difference in these two responses. I did not make anything of it. Elliot had 2 children, my grandchildren Luca, who is 7, and Stella, who is 4, and a demanding job in pharmaceutical sales, and a life that moved quickly. "We'll be thinking of you" was not the response I would have written for him, but I told myself it was the response of a busy person who would show up when showing up was required. I went into surgery on the 14th. The procedure itself went well. What did not go well was what happened in the recovery room, where a blood clot, a pulmonary embolism, the blood clot that travels to the lung, announced itself in the specific terrifying way that pulmonary embolisms announce themselves: sudden shortness of breath, chest pain, the monitor's alarm, the room changing. They managed it. This is the important fact: they managed it. I am here telling you this story, which means the management worked. But there were hours in the early days of my hospital stay where managed was not yet certain, where the doctors spoke to Ren. Who was there? Who was in the waiting room? Who was the person they could speak to in the careful, measured language of people who are not yet certain of the outcome? Ren told me this later. She had not told me in the hospital because I had not needed to hear it in the hospital. What I had needed in the hospital was her hand and her voice telling me it was going to be okay. She gave me those. Elliot called when Ren reached him with the complication. He said, "God, Mum, that's serious. I'm going to try to get up there." He did not get up there. He called again the following day. "How are you feeling? Is it stabilizing?" It was stabilizing. I told him it was stabilizing. He said, "That's good. That's really good. I'll come as soon as I can get away." He did not come. Over 12 days, during which I was moved from the ICU to a regular room and began the slow process of recovery and learned to use a walker and had the specific demoralizing experiences that come with 12 days in a hospital when you are a person who has been independent your entire life and now needs someone else to help you to the bathroom. Over those 12 days, Elliot called 4 more times. Each call was brief. Each call included some version of, "I'll get up there soon." Each call ended with the understanding that soon meant something that would not be today or tomorrow. I did not ask why. I am examining this now, the fact that I did not ask. And I think the reason is that asking why would have required hearing the answer. And I was managing 12 days of fear and pain and the particular loneliness of hospital nights, and adding the hurt of whatever answer Elliot would have given was more than I had the capacity for in those days. So I didn't ask. I accepted the calls. I said I was managing. I told him not to worry. And I lay in the 3 a.m. light, and I was afraid, and I thought about Thomas, who would have been there every day, and about Ren, who was 4 hours away and called 3 times a day, and about the 40 minutes between my hospital room and my son's house. I thought about that 40 minutes many times in 12 days. I did not look at Casey's Instagram. I came home on the 26th. I looked at the Instagram on the 27th. 31 photographs. I want to tell you about them in some detail because detail is what makes the difference between understanding something intellectually and understanding it in the body. The first photograph was posted on the 15th, the day after my surgery, the day the complication occurred. The day Ren was in the waiting room being told things in careful language by doctors who were not yet certain. It was a photograph of a departure lounge, an airport. The caption was, "Wheels up, we needed this." They had flown to Florida on September 15th. the day after my surgery, the day of the complication. The second photograph was the resort. The third was the pool. The fourth was a beachside restaurant dinner candles. The fifth through eighth were the children Luca and Stella, my grandchildren, in the ocean, happy brown, from sun entirely unaware that their grandmother was in a hospital 40 minutes from their home, learning to use a walker after a blood clot in her lung. The ninth photograph was Casey, on the beach. The specific golden hour beach photograph of a beautiful woman who knows how to take a beautiful photograph. The caption, "Salt heals everything." Salt heals everything. Photograph 21 was the parasailing. High above the water, exhilarated arms wide. Photograph 27 was what I thought was the most revealing of all of them. A cocktail at Sunset Elliott, and Casey's hands both holding glasses. The water in the background. The caption, "No plans, no schedule, just us. Grateful for every moment. Grateful for every moment." I sat with 31 photographs for a long time. Not in anger, exactly. Anger came later in smaller doses, more precisely targeted. What I sat with first was something more fundamental, the rearranging of a world. I had believed certain things about my son, that he was at his core a person who showed up for his family when showing up mattered, that the distance in our relationship was circumstantial, busy lives, demanding schedules, the normal drift of parents and grown children, not fundamental, that if I were truly in need, the Elliot who was Thomas's son, the Elliot I had raised through grief and difficulty, would appear. 31 photographs told me that this belief had been for some time a story I was telling myself rather than a truth I was observing. He had known about the surgery for 6 weeks. He had known about the complication from Wren's call on the 15th. He had known I was in the hospital for 12 days, and he had been in Florida, not stranded somewhere, not in a crisis of his own. Not unable to leave, the parasailing photograph made it clear he had no physical limitation on movement. He had simply chosen. He and Casey had planned a vacation and decided that the vacation took priority over a mother in the hospital with a pulmonary embolism 40 minutes from their home. And they had documented the vacation in 31 photographs and posted them for the 2,000 followers of Casey's Instagram account, including me. I was one of those followers. Did they know I might look? I don't know. I think Casey, who manages her online presence with considerable intentionality, probably did not think about the fact that I followed her account. I was at the far edge of her intended audience. Or perhaps she thought about it and made a different calculation. I don't know. I have decided I don't need to know. What I know is what I saw, and what I saw was enough. I want to tell you before I tell you what I did do, what I chose not to do. I did not call Elliot and confront him. This is the response that many people in my situation, in our family's situation, in the situation of a mother who has just discovered that her son was parasailing while she recovered from a pulmonary embolism, would choose. The call, the confrontation, the accounting for 31 photographs and 12 days and 40 minutes and 0 visits. I considered it. I sat in my chair and I considered it for several days in the specific way I consider things that matter. Turning them over, examining them from different angles, waiting until the initial emotion has settled enough that what remains is what's true rather than what's reactive. What I decided was this: the confrontation would not give me what I needed, not because I didn't have the right to it. I had every right. Not because Elliot didn't deserve to be confronted. He did. But because a confrontation would put him in the position of defending himself, and Elliot, who is his father's son, in his pragmatism and his discomfort with emotion, would defend himself very well. He would have explanations. Casey would have explanations. The vacation had been planned for months. Wren was there. I was being managed by professionals. The complication had been addressed. There was nothing he could have done that wasn't being done. The explanations would be technically adequate. They would also be in the way of technically adequate explanations, entirely beside the point. The point was not whether his presence would have changed my medical outcome. The point was what his absence meant, what it revealed, what it said clearly and without words about the position I occupied in his life and in Casey's life. A confrontation would allow Elliot to respond to the technical question, could his presence have helped, and avoid the real one, what did his absence mean? I did not want to give him that escape. I also did not want to perform my hurt for an audience of one who would receive it defensively. The hurt was mine. I had a right to it. It was not his to manage. I did not call Wren and tell her about the photographs. I want to be clear about this too. Wren did not know at this point about the vacation. She knew Elliot had not come. She had not said much about this. She was focused on me, on my recovery, on what I needed. She had a protective instinct about my feelings that meant she did not press me on things I hadn't raised. She would have been furious on my behalf. Her fury would have been legitimate and warranted, and I could have leaned into it and been warmed by it. I chose not to, because this was not Wren's situation to be furious about. It was mine. And I had learned in 64 years that other people's fury on your behalf, while temporarily comforting, does not actually do the work that needs doing. The work that needed doing was mine. I did not tell my friend Dottie, who had come to the hospital in the afternoons, and who is the most loyal person I know, and who would have had opinions I couldn't have unheard. I did not post anything on my own social media, which I use sparingly but do use. I did not tell my sister in Rochester, who worries about me, and would have worried more. I sat with the photographs and with the rearrangement of my world, and I did the only thing that felt true and right and entirely mine to do. I called my attorney. Her name is Barbara Hollowell. She has been my attorney for 20 years since Thomas died, and I needed someone to help me understand what I had and what I was responsible for, and how to protect the children's future while also managing the present. She answered on the third ring. I said, "Barbara, I need to update my will." She said, "Of course. Are you available next week?" I said, "I'm recently out of the hospital. Can we do it sooner?" She said, "Tomorrow morning." "Thank you," I said. I went to Barbara's office the next morning. Before I tell you what I changed, let me tell you what I had, because the conversation I had with Barbara that morning required me to look clearly at what I had built, and looking clearly at it was itself a significant act for a woman who had spent 30 years telling herself that what she was doing was enough, and that the future would take care of itself. The house on the tree-lined street paid off, purchased 12 years ago for $240,000 worth now, in the market that had done what it had done closer to 410. A retirement account, 30 years of careful saving, of contributing the maximum I could, of watching it grow with the patient consistency of someone who understood that compound interest left alone does something remarkable. Current value approximately $380,000. A savings account, $42,000. Life insurance, $200,000, for which I had been paying premiums since Thomas died, because I understood from Thomas the specific devastation of losing the person who provides without having planned for their absence. Thomas's life insurance, I had been the beneficiary. Most of it had gone to the children's education and the house, and the years of managing without a second income. What remained, a small amount invested carefully for 17 years, was approximately $68,000. Total approximately $1,100,000. Not a fortune, but more than I had ever said aloud, more than I had allowed myself to think of as mine, in the sense of an asset rather than a responsibility. My existing will, which I had last updated 5 years earlier, divided everything equally between Elliot and Wren. Equal shares, 50% each. The logic of equal shares is deeply embedded in most parents. Equal is fair. Equal says I love you both the same. Equal says you are equally my children, and I make no distinction between you. I had believed this logic for 30 years. I sat in Barbara's office, and I questioned it. Not in the spirit of punishment. I want to be clear about this, not as punishment. Punishment is about inflicting pain in response to a wrong. What I was doing was something different. I was updating a document to reflect what I now understood about my children, my resources, and what I wanted those resources to do when I was gone. "Tell me what you're thinking," Barbara said. I told her about the hospital. I told her about the 12 days and the 40 minutes and the 4 phone calls and the 0 visits. I told her about the 31 photographs. Barbara listened without expression. She is good at listening without expression, which is one of the reasons I have worked with her for 20 years. When I was done, she said, "What do you want to do?" I told her. She made notes. Then she said, "Before we finalize this, I want to ask you something." "Ask," I said. "Are you making this decision from the clarity of someone who has thought it through, or from the pain of someone who has just come home from the hospital?" I looked at her. "Both," I said, "and I don't think those are mutually exclusive." She considered this. "No," she said. "They aren't." "The pain is what made me look clearly," I said. "The clarity is what I'm deciding from." "All right," she said. "Let's proceed." The letter came before the will was finalized. I wrote it on a Tuesday evening, 3 days after coming home from the hospital the night before my appointment with Barbara. I had thought about whether to write it at all. The will alone was a statement clear, legal, final, requiring no explanation and offering no opportunity for response. I could have simply changed the will and said nothing, and let Elliot discover it in the way that wills are discovered at the reading when it is too late for anything except understanding. I decided to write the letter because the will was about the future, and the letter was about the present. The will was my decision about what my resources would do. The letter was about what I needed Elliot to understand right now while I was still alive, and while he was still my son, and while there was still in some form the possibility of something between us being different from what it had been. I wrote it in one sitting. I did not draft it multiple times. I wrote it the way I write when I know what I mean directly without revision, trusting that what comes out is what is true. I'm going to share it with you. Not all of it. But the part that matters. The part that I folded into an envelope and addressed to Elliot and mailed, not emailed, not texted, mailed in the postal service with a stamp the following morning. It said, "Elliot, I am writing this because there are things I want you to know, and because I have decided I don't want to know your response. Not right now. Possibly not ever. So I am writing a letter which you cannot respond to in the moment, which gives you time to sit with it before you say anything, and which gives me the freedom to say what I mean without managing your reaction as I say it. I was in the hospital for 12 days. You live 40 minutes away. You did not come. I am not going to tell you how that felt, because you are an intelligent person, and you know how it felt, and explaining it further would be doing for you the work of empathy that is yours to do, not mine. I found Casey's photographs. I am not going to tell you what I felt when I saw them for the same reason. I want to tell you something that is not about anger and not about what you did wrong. It is about what I understand now that I did not fully understand before September. I understand now that the distance I have felt between us for the past several years is not circumstantial. I told myself it was busy lives, 2 children, a demanding job, the normal drift. I believed that story because believing it allowed me to maintain a version of our relationship that I needed. I no longer need to maintain that version. What I need now is to be honest about what is real, and what is real is this. When I was in a hospital bed with a blood clot in my lung, and a real question about the outcome, you were not there. You had the information. You had the proximity. You made a different choice. I am not telling you that choice was unforgivable. I am not telling you I am done being your mother. I am not telling you what to do with this letter. I am telling you I saw it clearly. For the first time, I saw it clearly. And clarity, once arrived at, does not reverse. I have asked in my letter that you not respond to it. Not immediately, not out of anger or a desire to punish, but because I need some time to be with what I understand without managing your response to it. If you want to talk eventually, I will be here. I am always your mother. But I am also a person who was afraid for 12 days in a hospital room, and I needed someone, and the person who should have come did not come. That is what I need you to know. Mum, I mailed it. I did not read it again after I sealed the envelope. Then I went to Barbara's office. Barbara had prepared the documents. She had also, being Barbara, prepared a question. "Before we execute," she said, setting the folder on the desk between us, "I want to walk you through what you've asked for and confirm it's what you intend. Not because I doubt your judgment, because changes like this are irreversible in a meaningful sense. Not legally irreversible. You can update again any time, but irreversible in the sense that once you know you've done it, your relationship to the situation is different. You'll know what you decided. So will I. And eventually, so will they." "I understand," I said. "Then let me walk you through it." She walked me through it, the house to Wren. Outright. Her name on the deed. The retirement account to Wren as beneficiary with a provision for her children if she predeceased me. The savings to Wren. Thomas's investment account to Wren. The life insurance I was leaving this to a specific charity, the cardiac care unit of the hospital where I had been treated. Not symbolically, because they had saved my life, and because I had the means to help them do it for someone else. Elliot received a bequest, specific, named, in the document, $5,000. Not nothing. But not the $550,000 he would have received under the previous equal division. And a letter, a second letter, different from the one I had mailed. This one was written into the will itself as a statement of intent, which in some jurisdictions is an optional but legally recognized element. Barbara had advised me on its language. It said in the dry, precise language of legal documents, "I leave to my son, Elliot Thomas Marsh, the sum of $5,000, $5,000, and express the following as my intention that this bequest represents not the absence of love, but the presence of clarity. I loved my son throughout his life. I also saw clearly what our relationship was and what it was not. This document reflects both truths simultaneously." Barbara had pushed back gently on the language. "You don't need to explain," she said. "The document can simply reflect the distribution." "I know," I said, "but I want him to read it in my words. In a document he cannot argue with in a room where I am not present to be managed." Barbara considered this. "It's unusual," she said. "Yes," I said. "It's legally sound," she said. "Yes," I said. "All right," she said. She had typed it. I read it. I signed. The new will was executed on September 29th, 13 days after the surgery, 15 days after the first of 31 photographs. Wren did not know. Elliot did not know. Barbara and I knew. And I went home to my craftsman house on the tree-lined street, and I drank my coffee on the porch, which I was able to do again with my walker, which I was beginning to resent, and which I was determined to set aside before winter, and I sat with what I had done. I felt many things. I am going to be honest about this, because honesty is the only thing that's worth anything. I felt the specific heaviness of a door that has been closed. Not a slammed door, a door closed quietly with full understanding of what is on the other side of it. The heaviness of finality. I felt something I didn't expect: grief. Grief for the version of Elliot I had believed in. The version who was Thomas's son in his best qualities. The version who would show up when showing up was required. I had loved that version for 38 years, and the hospital had shown me that version was not what I thought it was. Grieving it did not feel like weakness. It felt like honesty, and I felt underneath those things something steady, something that was not satisfaction. This was not a satisfying moment, but that was its own kind of solidity. The solidity of a person who has looked at something clearly and made a decision that reflects what they actually see. I was not pretending anymore. That was the solid thing. I drank my coffee. The leaves on the tree-lined street were turning. In Rochester, my sister was probably doing the same thing. In her city, wherever it was, Wren was probably at work. In Florida, or home from Florida, now home in the house 40 minutes away, Elliot was reading a letter. He called on a Saturday, 4 days after I had mailed the letter. I had calculated the mail time and had expected the call, had not known exactly when, but had known it would come within the week. He called on a Saturday morning. I was on the porch with my coffee, which I had managed to carry to the porch without the walker for the first time, a small victory, the kind that matters enormously when you have spent 12 days in a hospital. I let the phone ring once, twice, Then I answered. "Mum," he said. "Hello, Elliot," I said. The silence that followed was not the silence of someone who has nothing to say. It was the silence of someone who has too many things to say and does not know in which order to say them. "I got your letter," he said. "I know," I said. "Mum," he started. "I asked you not to respond immediately," I said. "In the letter. I asked for time." "It's been 4 days," he said. "Yes," I said. "I can't," he said. "Mum, I can't just sit with this and not call you. I need to talk to you." I looked at the leaves on the trees. "Then talk," I said. He talked. He told me about the vacation, that it had been planned for 8 months, that Casey had organized it, that the dates had been set before my surgery was scheduled, that when I told them about the surgery in August, they had discussed cancelling and had decided both of them. He said both of them twice, that since Ren was coming, and since the surgery was routine, and since cancelling 8 months of planning would mean losing the deposits, and the children were so excited, he talked for several minutes. I let him. Not because I was building to a response, because I had asked him to sit with the letter and he hadn't, and so he was saying the things he would have said if I had confronted him, the technically adequate explanations, the ones I had predicted, the ones that answered the question of whether his presence would have changed the medical outcome without touching the question of what his absence meant. When he stopped, I said, "I hear you." He said, "Do you understand? I understand what you've told me," I said. "Is it enough?" he said. And there it was. The real question finally, is it enough? Is the explanation enough to restore the version of things that existed before I mailed the letter? I sat with this for a real moment, not to be cruel, not to make him wait as punishment, but because it was a real question that deserved a real answer. "No," I said. Silence. "Elliot," I said, "I'm not calling what you did unforgivable. I'm not telling you I don't love you, but you asked me a real question, and the honest answer is no. The explanation is not enough, because the explanation is about logistics, the deposit, the planning, the dates. And what happened was not a logistical problem. What happened is that I had a blood clot in my lung, and you were parasailing." Very long silence. "I didn't know it was going to be that serious," he said. "When we left, it was supposed to be a routine surgery. Ren called me about the complication after we landed." "And when she called?" I said. He was quiet. "Elliot," I said, "when Ren called you on the 15th and told you there was a complication, what did you think about coming back?" A long pause. "Casey thought," he started. "Not Casey," I said. "You. What did you think?" The silence was different now. Not the silence of someone managing their response. The silence of someone sitting with a question they have not until this moment allowed themselves to sit with. "I thought the doctors were handling it," he said finally, quietly. "Yes," I said. "They were. And Ren was there." "She was," I said. "I told myself you were being taken care of," he said. "I was," I said. "So it felt..." He stopped, started again. "It felt like there was nothing I could specifically do that wasn't already being done." I looked at the leaves. "Elliot," I said, "do you know why people go to hospitals when someone they love is there?" He didn't answer. "Not to perform a medical function," I said. "Not because their presence changes the outcome. They go because the person in the bed is afraid and in pain and alone in the dark at 3 a.m, and having someone there, having someone who loves you there, changes what that feels like. Not the outcome, the feeling." Silence. "I was afraid," I said. "For 12 days. And at 3 a.m, when the monitor was blinking and the corridor was quiet, I was alone with that fear. Not because the outcome required you, because I needed you. Those are different." The silence that followed this was the longest of the call. When Elliot spoke, his voice was different from all the versions it had been since he called. "I'm sorry, Mum," he said. Not "I understand," or "I can see how you feel," or any of the managed forms of acknowledgement. Just, "I'm sorry." "I know," I said. "I should have come," he said. "Yes," I said. I don't have an excuse for that, he said. The explanation I gave you, the planning, the deposits, that's not an excuse. I know that. I know you know, I said. Can I come see you? He said. I looked at the walker leaning against the porch railing, at the leaves, at the coffee going cold in my hand. Yes, I said. Come Thursday. He came Thursday. He came alone. I noticed this, and I was grateful for it, not because I wanted to exclude Casey, but because the conversation that needed to happen was between me and my son, not mediated by anyone else's presence. He looked different when I opened the door. Or perhaps I was looking at him differently. He looked like a man who had been sitting with something uncomfortable for 4 days and had not found a way to make it comfortable. Good. That was right. I let him in. We sat in the living room. I did not offer tea immediately, which is what I usually do, the hospitality reflex that puts activity between people and the things they need to say. I sat in my chair and he sat on the sofa, and we looked at each other. I want to tell you something, he said. All right, I said. When Casey and I discussed the vacation in August, when you told us about the surgery, we talked about whether to cancel. And Casey had a number of reasons why it would be okay to go. The routine nature of the surgery, Ren being there, the sunk costs. And I listened to those reasons and I agreed with them. He paused. But I also... He stopped. Tried again. I also knew. In a part of me I didn't look at directly. I knew it wasn't right to go. I knew it. And I let Casey's reasoning cover that knowing. And I went anyway. I sat with this. Thank you for telling me that, I said. It doesn't fix it, he said. No, I said. It doesn't. Is there anything that fixes it? He asked. I thought about this honestly. I don't know yet, I said. I'm not in a place where I can tell you what will fix it, or if it can be fixed the way it was before. What I can tell you is that I'm here, and you're here, and we're talking honestly, and that's a start. It's more than I deserve, he said. Maybe, I said. But you're my son. I'm not going to pretend that's not true because of what happened. He looked at me. Mum, he said. I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. All right, I said. Did seeing the photographs Casey's Instagram, is that what changed things beyond just the absence? I thought about how to answer this precisely. The photographs didn't change what happened, I said. They made it impossible to pretend I didn't know what had happened. Before I saw them, I could tell myself there were reasons I didn't know about. That things were complicated meant something I wasn't aware of. The photographs removed the possibility of not knowing. He nodded slowly. She didn't think, he started. Elliot, I said. I'm not going to have a conversation about Casey's intentions today. Casey and I will have our own conversation when we're ready. Today is about you and me. Okay, he said. Okay, I said. We talked for 2 hours. Not about the hospital, not only about the hospital. About Thomas. About what it had been like after Thomas died. About the specific particular things a father's absence creates in a child. Things that I had watched Elliot navigate for 17 years, and that I had perhaps not discussed with him directly enough in the years he became an adult. About Casey, not specifically, but about the dynamic I had observed over 8 years and had managed in my fashion without naming. About what I needed from him now. Not an apology repeated. I had heard the apology, I believed it was real, repeating it served neither of us. What I needed was different. I need you to be present, I said. Not in a programmatic way, not a scheduled call every week, but actually present. I need you to pick up the phone sometimes when there's nothing to report. I need you to think about me the way I think about you, which is regularly without a specific occasion requiring it. I need to not be someone you attend to when circumstances force the attendance. He heard this. I can do that, he said. I don't know yet if you can, I said. I'll find out over time. He nodded. That's fair, he said. He hugged me when he left. A real hug, not the brief, efficient embrace of our recent years, but the hug of someone who is aware of what could have been lost and is attempting to hold what remains. I let him. I stood at the door after his car was gone. The walker was still on the porch. I was going to be rid of it within the week. I went inside and sat in my chair and I thought about the will. He didn't know about the will. He would know when I was gone or when I chose to tell him. I had not decided when that would be. What I had decided was that the will was not a weapon. It was a document. It said what was true as of September 29th. Whether it still said what was true depended on what the future looked like. I was 64 years old. I planned to be 65 in December and considerably older after that. There was time. Casey called in October. Not Elliot Casey directly, which surprised me in the way that things that reveal character surprise you. Not because they're unexpected exactly, but because they show you something you didn't know was there. "Dorothy," she said, "I know Elliot has talked to you. I wanted to call separately." "I'm glad you did," I said. "I want to tell you something," she said. "And I need you to know that Elliot doesn't know I'm calling. I'm calling for myself, not because he asked me to." "All right," I said. "The vacation," she said. "Going to Florida. That was my decision more than his. He had doubts. She paused. "I minimized them. I had good reasons, I thought I had good reasons. But looking at it now from where we are, I think what I had were justifications, not reasons." I listened. "I'm not comfortable with hospitals," she said. I know that sounds like I know how that sounds. But my mother was in and out of hospitals when I was young, long stays, and visiting was something I always dreaded. And I think I let my own discomfort with that become part of the reasoning about whether Elliot should go. There was something I had not known before this call, not that it excused anything, but it was true, and I received it as such. "I hear that," I said. "I should have said that to Elliot instead of giving him the other reasons," she said. "The practical ones. If I had been honest about my own avoidance, he could have. He would have been able to think more clearly about what the right thing was. Instead, I made it sound entirely rational, when part of it was fear." "Yes," I said. "I'm sorry," she said, "for what you went through without him there. For the photographs. I didn't when I was posting them. I wasn't thinking about whether you might see them. I know that's not a good excuse. But it's the truth." I sat with Casey's apology. It was more honest than I had expected. It acknowledged something, her own discomfort with hospitals, her role in the decision that didn't have to be acknowledged. She could have apologized generally in the vague form of apologies that cost nothing. She had been specific. "Casey," I said, "thank you for calling." "Of course," she said. "I want to tell you something," I said. "Not as a response to your apology stands, I receive it, but separately." "Okay," she said. "In the 8 years you've been my daughter-in-law." I said, "I have felt much of the time like I was at the edge of your life together, not excluded at the edge, and I have told myself, as I do with many things, that this was the natural order of adult families and not something to be named." She was quiet. "The hospital made me stop telling myself that," I said. "Not because of what it revealed about you specifically, because it gave me the clarity to stop managing what I was seeing and start acknowledging it." "I understand," she said softly. "I don't know exactly what changes," I said. "I don't have a prescription for it, but I know that the version of things where I was at the edge and managed my position there quietly is not the version I'm willing to continue." "What would you need?" she said. "To be seen," I said. "Not as an occasion, not as the grandmother who is invited when the children require a grandmother. As a person, your husband's mother, part of your family." Silence. "I can do that," she said. "I hope so," I said. "I'm willing to find out." We talked for a few more minutes, smaller things, the children, Stella's new school year, Luca's soccer, the fabric of ordinary family conversation. At the end, Casey said, "Dorothy, can I ask you something?" "Yes," I said. "The Instagram," she said. "I've been thinking about taking the account private, or taking a break from it. I haven't decided. But I've been thinking about it in the context of this." "That's between you and your account," I said. "I'm not asking you to change what you share with the world." I know, she said. But I've been thinking that what I share with the world and what's actually happening have gotten further apart than I realized. Not just with this, in general. This was more than I had expected from Casey in a call I had not expected. That sounds like something worth thinking about, I said. Yes, she said. It does. We hung up. I sat with the call. I did not call Elliot to tell him about it. It was Casey's call to make or not make. Her honesty was hers. I wasn't going to use it. Ren found out about the photographs in November. Not from me. I had not planned to tell her it was not her story to be burdened with, not initially. But Elliot told her apparently in the course of his own reckoning. He called her, and he told her, and she called me. Mum, she said. I know, I said. You knew the whole time, she said. Yes, I said. And you didn't tell me. No, I said. Why? She said. Because I said I needed to handle it myself, and because your fury, which is legitimate, would have made it harder for me to think clearly. You would have taken it on as your own and made it your fight, and it wasn't your fight. She was quiet for a moment. Are you okay? She said. Yes, I said. Really? She said. Because that's Mum, that's a lot to carry alone. I had Barbara, I said. Ren knew Barbara. What did Barbara do? She said. She helped me update my will, I said. A pause. Mum, Ren said. And what did you do? I told her. Not all of it, not the specific numbers, not the letter in the will, but the shape of it, the house to her, the retirement account to her, the charity for the cardiac unit, the bequest to Elliot. Ren was quiet for a long time. Are you sure? She said finally. Yes, I said, because if you did it in the heat of the moment... Ren, I said. I didn't do it in the heat of the moment. I did it after 3 days of thought in an attorney's office after discussing it carefully. I know what I did. And Elliot, she said. Does he know? No, I said. Not yet. When will you tell him? When I decide the time is right, I said. Or when I'm gone, and it doesn't matter whether the time is right. Ren was quiet for a moment. I don't want it to be that way, she said. The house, all of it. I don't want it because of this. I want it because you chose to give it to me. I am choosing to give it to you, I said. That's exactly what's happening. I am choosing from full clarity to give what I built to the person who has been present, not as a prize, as a reflection of what I know about my family. Another quiet moment. Mum, she said. Yes, I said. I love you, she said. I know, I said. I love you too. I'm coming for Thanksgiving, she said. Good, I said. Come early. I want to go to the farmer's market Saturday morning. The Walker, she said. Gone, I said. I set it aside 2 days ago. Mum, she said, and in her voice was all of it. The hospital, and the photographs, and the letter, and the will, and the Thursday, with Elliot, and the call from Casey, and the 2 weeks she had spent in the chair beside my bed, compressed into one word, her word for me. I know, I said. I'll be there Saturday, she said. Good, I said. It has been 1 year. I am 65 now, as of December, as I had intended. My hip is healed. The walker is in the basement in case I ever need it, and I intend never to need it again, which is probably optimistic, but is the right attitude to take. The cardiac care unit received the life insurance portion of the estate plan. I restructured this during the will update, and the gift will be a named fund when the time comes. I have already been in touch with the hospital's development office. They were gracious and specific about what the fund will support. This gave me more satisfaction than I had expected. The will stands as I wrote it in September. I have not told Elliot about the specific terms. I have thought about telling him many times in many ways, not to punish him. But because the will represents what I know, and living without him knowing what I know has a quality of withholding that I am not entirely comfortable with. I have decided to think about this more before I decide. What I can tell you is what the year has looked like. Elliot calls more often, not every week with mechanical regularity more than before and differently. He calls sometimes with nothing specific to report, which was not something he did in the years before the hospital. He asks how I am, in a way that waits for the real answer, rather than the fine answer. In February, when I had a bad week, a flu that was ordinary, but that hit harder than these things used to the specific vulnerability of a body that has been through something, he called on a Tuesday, and he said, "Do you want me to come?" Not, "Let me know if there's anything you need." "Do you want me to come?" I said I was managing, but I appreciated the offer. He said, "I'll come Sunday." He came Sunday. He brought food from the Italian place I like, and he sat with me for 3 hours, and we watched a film, and he did not talk about logistics or schedules or anything that required management. He just came. It is not everything. One Sunday in February is not 12 days in September, and what was lost in September cannot be fully recovered in a February afternoon. But it is something. Casey and I have coffee once a month now. Her idea, she called in November and suggested it, and I said yes. She is working, she has told me on some things. The Instagram account became private in October. She hasn't said this directly, she wouldn't. It's not in her nature to announce internal work. But the account went private, and the posting frequency reduced. And when I see her, she is present in a way she was not always present before. We are not close in the way I am close to Ren. We are honest. That is more than we were. Luca and Stella came for a weekend in April, just the two of them, a grandparent weekend, something Casey suggested and organised. 2 days during which I learned that Luca is becoming a reader, which fills me with specific joy, and that Stella has a theory about squirrels that she explained to me for 45 minutes, and that I received with complete engagement because it was genuinely interesting, and also because she is 4 years old, and squirrel theories deserve an audience. Ren came for the farmers market in November, for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, and has been back twice more just because. She calls regularly. She is as she has always been present. Nothing has changed about Ren. Everything she is was there before the hospital. The hospital simply made me see it more clearly. I want to tell you what I actually learned. The real thing, not the tidy version. The first thing is about fear. The 3 a.m. fear in a hospital room is one of the purest forms of clarity I have encountered. In ordinary life, we accumulate so many layers of story and management and self-deception around what we actually feel and what we actually know about our relationships. In a hospital room at 3 a.m, those layers become thin. What's left is very simple. What is true and who is there. Ren was there. Elliot was not. I had known before the hospital that these two things were different. I had not fully allowed myself to know what the difference meant. The hospital allowed me, required me more precisely. This is the gift of crisis that I did not expect to find in it. It is in its way a clarifier. You learn in a crisis who the people around you actually are not who they present themselves to be, not who they intend to be, not who they are in ordinary circumstances when effort is available. Who they are when the situation asks something of them, and you find out whether they have it to give. Some people do, some people don't. Both facts are useful to know. The second thing I learned is about the will. I want to be clear that the will was not revenge. I know this is how some people will read it, the satisfying story of the ungrateful son who gets less, and the devoted daughter who gets more. I understand the appeal of that reading. I also want to resist it, because revenge implies that the act is about inflicting pain, and the will is not about inflicting pain. The will is about accuracy. I had a document that said both my children should receive equal shares of what I built. Equal is just. Equal is what parents do. Equal is also, in certain situations, a fiction that says, I see both of you the same way with the same investment of presence and care and love. I no longer saw them the same way. Not because I loved Elliot less, but because the facts of our relationship, what he had given and what he had withheld and when, were facts. And a document that ignored those facts in the name of formal equality would be in a precise sense dishonest. I changed the will because I value honesty, including honesty in documents that will be read when I am not there to explain myself. The third thing I learned is about silence. I did not confront Elliot. I wrote a letter and asked him not to respond immediately. I did not perform my hurt for an audience. I changed the will without announcing it. I told no one what I knew until the time was right. This silence was not passive. It was chosen. It was deliberate. I have spent 64 years learning the difference between the silence that is avoidance, the silence that lets things fester and grow and continue, and the silence that is intention. The silence that is not the absence of a response, but the choice to let the action speak rather than the words. The will is silent. The letter was sent and required no response. The photographs were looked at and put down. In all of this silence, something happened that might not have happened in a confrontation. Elliot sat with what he had done without being able to defend himself out of it. Casey called without being asked. The relationship changed without being forced into a shape through argument. Silence chosen deliberately is one of the most powerful things available to a person who has been wronged. I learned this in September. I will not forget it. I want to ask you something. Because the people watching this story are going to fall into a few categories, and I'm curious which one you're in. The first category, you have been in a hospital, or a crisis, or a moment where the situation called something from the people in your life, and you found out who had it to give. You know the 3 a.m. fear. You know what it means to look at the door and count who walked through it. If you are in this category, I see you. I know what that counting feels like. I know the specific weight of the absence of someone who should have come. And I want to say your clarity about what you saw is not a betrayal of the people who weren't there. It's information. It's real. You are allowed to know what you know. The second category, you are an Elliot. You have been in a situation where someone you loved needed you, and you made a different calculation. You found reasons. You told yourself they were adequate, and now perhaps you are sitting with the fact that they were not. If you are in this category, the call is still available. Not to undo what happened, it can't be undone, but to show up now, to be different now, to let the person you failed see that you understand what you did, and that you are capable of being more than who you were in that moment. Elliot is not finished. Neither are you. The third category, you are watching this and thinking about your own will, about what you have built and what you intend it to say, and whether what it currently says reflects what is actually true about your family. I am not going to tell you what to put in your will. That is yours. But I want to offer the question I had to sit with. Does your document say what you actually know about the people in your life? Or does it say what you wish were true, what you hope is true, what Equal and Fair says should be true? These are different things. You are allowed to know the difference. And the fourth category, you are a Casey. You are someone who avoided, who found reasons, who documented a beautiful life while something difficult was happening nearby, and who has perhaps, in a quiet moment, looked at the photographs of that beautiful life and felt something that was not what the caption said. If you are in this category, Casey's phone call is available to you too. Make it. Not to fix things, some things don't fix. But to be honest, to say the true thing to the person who deserves to hear it, to be in the way that matters present. Leave me a comment. Tell me about your 3 a.m. Tell me about who was there and who wasn't. Tell me if you've ever been the person who wasn't there and what you did about it. Tell me what you would have done with the will. I read every comment. I'm Dorothy. I am 65 years old, and I drink my coffee on the porch of my craftsman house on the tree-lined street. I went to the farmer's market last Saturday with Ren. I am not afraid anymore. Or rather, I am afraid sometimes in the way of a person who has looked at the edge of their own life and knows what is there. But I am afraid with my eyes open. That is different. That is better. That is enough.